it's a winter wonderland here today. So we're going to open our tea and get that started, and then we're going to talk about bookish villains. So let's see where we are here. So we're on day 5, which looks like maybe a little flower, I guess, or a wreath. I think maybe that's supposed to be a wreath. All right, so let's reach in here. There we go. Okay, let's see what we got. This one is called Prince George tea. If I can get it open, we'll take a look. There we go. Okay. Gunpowder green tea, apples, and black currants. I don't think I've ever heard of gunpowder green tea. Have you? All right, so let me open it up. Hopefully it doesn't taste like whatever gunpowder tastes like. All right, so I'm going to pour it in our tea ball. There we go. Looks interesting. You can kind of see the currants in it. All right, and I have an actual teacup today, just so we look a little fancy. So I'm going to tuck it in there, and because it's tiny, it shouldn't take long to steep. All right, and while that's doing that, we will take a look at Bookish Villains. So, for anyone who's listening, there's probably going to be some spoilers in here if you haven't read the book, because sometimes you don't necessarily know it's the villain until later. But for the most part, I don't think I think everyone will be on board. So just a heads up in case. So the first one that comes to mind is Voldemort, because in the Harry Potter series, series of books, all through those, Voldemort was the villain, and he wanted total control of the magical world. Didn't care who he killed to get it, and he was there was no heart to him. Like there was no mercy, nothing that was gonna take away from him being the villain. So he was definitely my first pick, right, Oliver? And then the next one I was thinking of is Moriarty from Sherlock Holmes. He's a pretty famous villain. And he always seemed to, outsmart everyone, and he was evil, but he was very intelligent and always seemed to avoid being captured, and even Sherlock Holmes couldn't defeat him all the time, right? So those were the first two. The next one, and the next actually few, were from Stephen King novels. So for any of you who have read Stephen King, he does really good villains, the kind that stick with you long after the book is done. So I was thinking of Pennywise from It. So he was the clown that was in It, and frankly, clowns are creepy. So so it's he was definitely one of the ones that could haunt your nightmares afterwards. Um, and then there was another one from The Shining, Jack Torrance from The Shining, where he's hacking down the door and yelling out, "Here's Johnny!" It's those are the things again that stick with you. I mean, they become part of almost legend. And then Kathy Bates in Misery, when she played Annie Wilkes, that was a scary villain. You know, I mean, I don't think a writer could think of anything worse than something like that, or someone like that. And then we've read a lot of the Black Dagger Brotherhood books, and it's about a race of vampires who they're not actually brothers, but they're all kind of in the same sort of bloodline somewhere along the lines. And they fight together and live together, and they're basically trying to defeat the Lessers, which are a group of undead, I guess. Well, sort of vampires. Um, they were humans normally, sometimes vampires, but the villain is the Omega, and the Omega kind of sucks the life out of them, and then turns them evil. and so they have like pale hair and pale skin, and they're just they may act a little bit like their former selves, but for the most part they're kind of his puppets. But he is pure evil, the Omega, and to the point where, like, like he's when he does something to people, like there's this black goo, and he has he wants to take over everything. He has no soul, no mercy or anything. So he's he's definitely like a really major evil force, which is interesting because as the books go on, I mean, they've had, I don't know how many books, at least 18 in the series, probably more. And we read them for a long time, but eventually the Omega gets defeated. But then there's a new villain. But that was kind of when we quit doing anything, when we quit reading, because the new villain was not enough of a villain. She was too campy and I mean, she was supposed to be a villain, but she was just not villainish enough. Villainish, is that a word? Anyway, she just didn't seem to have that same evil force that the Omega did. So we were kind of out at that point. So the next one that we thought of was Strat from the book Hail Mary, which is a fairly new book. And the reason that we considered her the villain, Wonderful Husband and I, when we were talking about this, is the fact that she was a complicated villain. Like, she really wanted to save humanity, which, is a good cause, but she was willing to do anything to do it, including, taking this scientist who didn't want to go up in space because he knew he would never get back. And he wasn't, he was trying to figure out something else. Like, he wasn't willing to make that sacrifice of his life. And they basically drugged him and put him in the spacecraft and had the spacecraft take off while he was drugged. And so when he finally woke up, he's already in space and there's nothing he can do about it. And it's like, ooh, that's pretty villainish. So that one was interesting. Um, the other one we were thinking of was Nora Sinclair from the book Honeymoon by James Patterson. She came across as this lovely woman who, had a great decorating business and, was successful. But in the background, she's meeting all these men, marrying them under different names, and then killing them and taking their wealth. So, not such a nice woman. All right, so I'm going to take a look at this tea now and see how it's doing. It is. It's okay. It's another one that's, I mean, it's tastes fine, but I'm not tasting like a lot of, what did they say was in it? Apples and black currants. So I'm not really tasting a lot of that. Mostly the green tea flavor is coming through, which I'm okay with. I mean, I like green tea, but I don't taste a lot of the other things. But we're gonna leave it there and let it sit a little longer. Maybe it just hasn't steeped enough. So we'll let that do its thing. So those are some of the bookish villains that I came up with. So reading a decent amount of cozies. I mean, there's usually, I mean, yes, there's a murderer, but those are kind of, I hate to say throwaway villains. That makes it sound like it's not a good book, but they're villains you don't remember later, right? I mean, I'm thinking more of the villains that, that you're going to keep thinking about over and over. Or that somehow you remember them. I mean, I think of like Disney movies. I mean, we could pretty much name the villain in almost every Disney movie. I mean, Scar from The Lion King, and Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, and there's always a very dedicated villain in there somewhere that we think about. So that's um, an interesting way to look at it, for me is like, okay, the villain's got to be somebody that I remember later. Because a lot of times in a lot of books, you just don't, like, yeah, there was a villain, there was a bad guy, but you don't always remember who he is. But you're not going to forget Moriarty from Sherlock Holmes. I mean, that's he's definitely a top-notch villain. So what about you? Is there a villain that you can think of in certain books that you've read that you think is deserves a top spot on some of these lists? Um, I mean, again, like it's Disney is the my throwback when it comes to villains, because I also think like Ursula and the Evil Queen and those sort of people are all great villains. Which I mean, I like a good villain, but I like it to be a complicated villain. I don't want someone that's like the Omega was a good villain, but the Omega was pure evil. Like you never had to wonder what they were going to do. I kind of like a more complicated villain where, yes, they're a villain, but they either have what they consider a really good reason to be a villain, or there is some angst there that something that complicates them and makes them not just pure evil, that it makes their decisions more complicated than that. So I kind of like that part of it. So with that, it's it makes it so that I think there's a more interesting story because you're never totally sure what the person's going to do. But of course, when you're the embodiment of evil, I mean that's as good as it gets, right? All right, so that is it for us from today. Just a short one today. Thankfully, I don't have to go out and shovel this snow, so that's great. It looks beautiful outside. I think we've gotten, I don't know, I'd be guessing, but probably 10 centimeters, whatever that turns out to in inches. I can't calculate it that quickly. But it's still snowing, supposed to snow all day long. Makes me very glad today that I work from home. So I'm going to get ready to do that and finish my tea, which I'd give it probably about a 3 out of 5. Still not, it's not something I would order on its own. But so far we're doing pretty good. We've got, let me see my list here. There's a list on the back, or no, not on the back. It was on another page. Anyway, there's a list that I've done of the different teas and what we've rated them, and we've had a couple of 4 out of 5s. So not bad for the first few days. We'll see what the rest of the month brings us. All right. So have a great day, friends, and we will talk to you soon. All right. Bye bye.